I want to introduce our speaker, Dr. Tian Dayton. Wait a minute, I'm not done. I need a minute here. All right, so the first one, I got to share this. The coolest thing I ever saw in psychodrama was this woman, she fired God. I was like, man, I want that one. She fired God. I'm like, this is cool. All right, so for me, as an addiction counselor, before I knew about psychodrama, I knew about Dr. Tian Dayton, and her books are The Drama Within, The Living Stage, and more recently, Sociometrics, RTR, Relationship Trauma Repair. And Tian has navigated that bridge between addiction, bachelor's level people getting in the field, and psychodrama. And sociometrics, she's been able to methodically bring the practice of sociometry into the field of addiction so that we can do trauma work in the beginning and train people to do so. There's a lot in her book. I'm recommending it. It's an awesome book, and she's an awesome leader and a visionary. We did an empty chair on what the future of ASGPP looks like in psychodrama. And years ago, Tian had a vision, and with her hard work and diligence and love, she's brought it to fruition, and she's going to give us some of that today. Wow. Please help me welcome Dr. Tian Dayton.
Thank you, Dave. I've got a mic.
Good.
Thank you, Dave, for introducing me better than I would possibly introduce myself and the work I'm doing and showing you. First, I have to say, if I fired God, it was on behalf of somebody who wanted to fire God. I don't feel I can hire and fire God, right? Right? So was that a client? Wanted to fire God. So anything is possible, and in the Moreno tradition, I would have said, you want to fire God? Fire God, right? Personally, God is never fired. If I had sat in that chair, that was such a cool warm-up that Dave and Lori did. I just loved hearing what everybody was saying. If I had sat in it, I was sort of scared to sit in it and say what I'm about to say. But what I observe is happening is that psychodrama is hybridizing all over the place, that people are adopting role play into their otherwise successful methods, whether we want them to or not, whether we support it or not. And I have always danced this dance because I'm in the addictions field, and people really don't get the kind of training we would like to see them get. That's why I'm doing floor checks and so forth. But I also see us in the future as being, maintaining the top of the field, the classical method. Because what I see happening in this hybridizing process is that people do it wrong. They leave out role reversal, which is, wrong. They leave out doubling, which maybe I can live with, maybe I can't, I'm still wondering. But you cannot leave out role reversal and be doing psychodrama. So I see us, in addition to doing what we already do, as casting ourselves above everyone who is going to eventually be in our field, because we are the neurobiological solution. We are the best body therapy. And I love Peter Levine's work, but I incorporate Peter Levine's work into psychodrama, somatic experiencing. I love Steve Porges's theoretical, polyvagal, but we can incorporate that into the psychodrama work we do. But we know how to do psychodrama. So I'm very keen on our being true to the classical method, but at the same time, I'm realizing the need to change. I have adult children, and one is in the field, and they just don't think the way I think. The current thing that I observe is people get masters and this and this and this and this. They get masters and a year at Ackerman for family and their somatic experiencing, and they do EMDR. So they get all these separate certificates. I think there's room for us. Oh, I don't dare say it because I feel like you'll all just take your coffee cups. But anyway, I think we need to lead that pack. I think we need to train them and see ourselves as in charge of our own method and correct what's already happening because it's already happening. And I don't really want a review of Fritz Perls using the empty chair and never referring. I know all of these methods right now that are doing psychodrama, and they got it from Moreno, and they never mention the word psychodrama. And we have lived through an entire generation of that happening. And none of those people, I won't name names, but they're methods that are out there and respected, and they got it from psychodrama. I know because I would talk to Zerka about where did this person get trained. I talked to the actual trainers. Where did you get this? So I want us to, catch up and move past, and lead that. And not act as if we can manage it by staying siloed and by saying we'll only do it this way. Because if we could manage it, it would have been managed by now. That's kind of my thinking. And I also really respect my own children. And so there's no teacher like your own kids. And what they teach me, and my own trainees, who are like, the next layer of kids I love, they do it the way, they belong to a world beyond us that I can't control. So I want to stay with them. I want to learn from them too. And that's so far what I'm learning through observation. That said, this explains why I am doing floor checks. Moreno said, according to Bob Soroka, we get them into the door with psychodrama, we heal them with sociometry. When Bob first said that, it took me a decade to absorb it, right? First of all, I didn't understand sociometry well enough. I mean, as a young psychodramatist. Then it took time for me to really understand the depth of that statement. That doesn't mean that psychodrama isn't a phenomenally healing, if you do it in a trauma-informed way to heal relational trauma. There's nothing like it, and there's nothing like it for doing grief work. There's just that I have ever seen. But for group work in treatment centers, which is why I came up with this, it's really hard to gauge when treatment populations can handle psychodrama, right? I mean, when you'll just blow the group out of the water or the person. I mean, it's a tough call, but they can handle floor checks. And other groups can handle floor checks. Who just came up to me and said you used it, anyway, in an educational setting? Yeah, you used it in what setting? It's okay, when you get done chewing. Teaching group counseling. So the advantage to that, and we all know that from our field, is that as you learn, you heal yourself. I don't know about the rest of you, but I came into this field to heal myself. I didn't have big things of of course I wanted to help the world, but I needed this. And many years into it, I realized how much good it was doing everybody else. But I had to first attend to this explosion that one of the people talked about, Becca, I think, this world we live in that happens once you embrace psychodrama. It's just incredible what happens to your life. So I'm with Becca's vision. I want to see it everywhere. I'm with Alvin Toffler, who thought there should be a psychodrama stage in every house of the future. And I want to introduce you to floor checks. Why are these why these are mine? A lot of people think these are locograms, and I'm old enough now, I'm 72, so I introduced these 20 years ago, and people now think they're sort of part of psychodrama and part of sociometry, but they aren't. The reason I came up with these is because locograms and spectrograms didn't work well enough for long enough. And I love locograms and spectrograms. I mean, I bow at the altar of those remarkable sociometrics. But once you've done a locogram a couple of times, the group wants to do something else. And once you've done a spectrogram a couple of times, even if you're really good at it, and I thought at first I'm not good at it enough, but eventually I got pretty good at it, and it still wasn't enough. There wasn't enough to do. So I had a trainee who, but innovation is scary, right? It's scary, especially scary if you've got a lot of psychodramatists looking over your shoulder telling you not to innovate. And we have that part of our legacy too. It's just keep it, don't change this method. But I had a desperate trainee. All of the budgets had been cut in New York State. He had 30 to 35 people, and he was supposed to do therapy with that many people. And everybody in my training group just wanted to jump out a window at the idea of doing that. But when I got home, I thought a sociometrist should be able to solve this. So I can't fail this guy. And I came to the next group with a bunch of feelings written on papers, right? And I just asked the group, you know, this seasoned training group of, you know, brilliant, wonderful people, some criterion questions. Something came alive in front of me that I will never, ever forget. But I didn't tell anyone I was doing this. I kept it a secret because I was really nervous that I would be criticized for not being spontaneous and writing words on the floor. Until I heard, I think I saw Louise here somewhere, that somebody said that Louise Lippman is using these and loves them. And I thought, okay, Louise, I never told you that, or maybe I did. Yes, and once I knew you liked them, Louise, I felt much better about everything. Louise and I have gone through training together. And she's brilliant. So that's when it started. And then I used them maybe the next 10 years in treatment centers around the country. And by the fourth year or something, every group looked the same. It was remarkable. Whatever state I was in, they all followed the same pattern. They all looked the same. So the controls on these were very reliable. And I could train people who aren't well enough trained in psychodrama to do it well, to do these. So that's floor checks. I know for all of you who are such psychodramatists, I worry about boring you, but I will unbore you when we do the attachment timeline. So but because you're all so spontaneous and interesting, you'll make it interesting. The thing in treatment that you need to do is get people, right? In treatment, whoever works in treatment groups, you look around at a group and they're looking at you like this. And they're like that, literally like that so you want to get people up out of their chairs and connecting with each other. So walk over to a feeling that you're experiencing right now. Stand near it, and then we'll share a sentence about why you're there. If this is, feel free to zoom around on this if that is that too difficult. Okay. Yeah, okay, well, if you want to, you don't have to find a feeling, you can do it from here. You participate anyway. Okay, Dave, are you wandering with the mic somewhere? Dave? Wait a minute. Yeah, you've got the mic? Yeah. Okay, so if you'll notice what is, can I have your, see, oh, you're already ignoring me, which is exactly what I like to have happen. It takes, you know, this group does everything. You're already in the third step of this whole process. You're already forming sociometric clusters, you're already sharing, and you're already ignoring me. Share with the people near you why you chose what you chose. Did you see that?
You want this or you want me to go?
I want you to go. Is that, but yeah. I mean, we skipped the first two steps because they're already in the third.
Up, yeah.
Well, I mean, they're so cool.
Yeah.
This is so much fun, Dave.
I know.
Oh,
I know.
God, this is so much fun. I needed this.
Yeah, good, good.
Yeah.
So did we. Look.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Ah, I can't.
Grateful. Yeah. I needed this. This is great. This is so much fun, right? Oh. Are you? Louise, that was so
sweet
glad
to say that.
You know, it was the absolute truth. Once I heard you liked them, I thought, okay, if Louise likes them, I'm okay.
Right. Well, you know, that's what Laverne and I were using all your stuff, and we were doing the 12-step. And so we did this for, what was it, step 6 and 7.
That was really fun to give a shout out to Louise, because that's been 40 years ago, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
The third table out, second or third table out, Karen, Lori, and I have our Psychodrama Institute of Philadelphia.
You know what? I've got to track this, but I want to hear this. I just stand by because I've got to do. Okay. May I move us along just for training purposes? May I break in on your brilliant conversations and sharing? The step that you all skipped, but because I want to show you how this can be used, I'm going to, reel it back. Is that okay? This is actually the second thing I train, or the third, is that you gather, you're sociometrically aligned according to feeling, according to symptom, according to whatever. This sociometric alignment allows for the group to become healing agents of each other. Why did I do this? Because I had all these staffs to train, and I didn't want to travel to California 4 times a year. And I had to find ways to train trainers who could train this, and a process that was doable without extensive knowledge. You see how easy this is to do. And the first thing you do actually is individually say, stand on a feeling and share. I'm not going to bother walking you through that because it's just easy to grab. But when that happens, you can do some subsequent things because the group is hearing the individual share. So then you can also, and another prompt, which would be walk over to someone who said something with which you identify or that moved you. You can say, place your hand on their shoulder, or don't place your hand on their shoulder and share with them what it was, right? I don't tend to place hands on anything because I work in the addictions field and it makes people twitchy. So I don't think we need to walk through that, right? That's pretty clear. But what you were, just to decode what this was, step 3 started happening. There's a bubble in the room, there's a sharing, there's an identifying. This is a good networking, it's good to do. You can do it for a huge group first thing in a conference to connect people. You can use different stuff on the floor, like, where do you work, the addictions, mental health, nursing, whatever. You can connect around anything you want to put on the floor. And Steve Porges, who is polyvagal, looked at this and made the comment that I was so in love with, which is this is a new way to do therapy because the role of the therapist is reduced, right? And the role of the group member to member connection is enhanced. I'm giving power to the people. I love it for that. And I reduce the role of the therapist because in the addictions field, there are just a ton of therapists who should not be over-empowered in any field. It doesn't do us any good to feel powerful in the role. It robs the clients, and we goof. I goof anyway if I get into that space. And we should feel empowered, but do you know what I'm trying to say? It reduces the ego issues. And the other thing that Steve commented on, it heals through co-regulation. So this is co-regulation that we are experiencing now. It's healing through co-regulation. And I think that's enough on floor checks. You can see how easily they work. I've got and I want to make one other comment. Another kind of discovery of mine with floor checks was doing an anger one, because I was working with, again, in the field and with a lot of anger and rage issues. And they scared me, right? It's hard to deal with that. But if you put it on the floor in the many manifestations of anger, which are criticism, stonewalling, and nobody really, sexual acting out, self-medicating, all kinds of manifestations, they become much more manageable in the room. And people start to, I remember at a group with men at the Meadows, they were just alive doing this anger thing. And they started healing each other, patting each other on the back, forming clusters, doing all of this stuff around the relief of understanding how anger was manifesting for them. And the psychic lift of getting more educated about that. So what I would like to do with you, now we're done at 10, right? Oh, 10:15. Oh, that's great. How would you feel about moving straight into something, an attachment timeline? You know everything else. I mean, this is something I've just working on that's part of the Sociometrics, Moreno's term, but I have extended with great, anyway, it's a long story. But anyway, I've got certain of my own sociometrics, but then Moreno sociometrics are there too, right? Spectrogram, locogram. And who came up with a step-in circle? I'm still trying to figure that out. It's so good, but it's not Moreno, I think, right? The what?
Started out with the wind blows. Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's the other thing that's the other thing that psychodrama does, is absorb. We're like a snowball rolling down the hill, and we absorb a lot of things that we think are ours, but we need to honor their origin too. Why don't you all have a seat? Are you frustrated that you didn't get to talk enough or anything like that? Do we need to? Okay, thanks. Have a seat. Lori, are you?
I got it.
Okay. Oh, Helga, would you help me? Thank you. Would you mind gathering these up? Or actually, will you mind putting the numbers out?
Good morning.
Hi. I'm good. How are you, darling? So good to see you. Yes. Hey. Hi. Would miss you. You darling girl.
The step-in circle, I think, came from credential. You know the thing about
The man.
Oh, we've got to figure it out. Thank you.
step-in comes from St. Elizabeth's High School.
That's what I thought. It's kind of St. Elizabeth. That's right. Okay, step in circle. Nina Garcia just said comes from St. E's, right?
Yeah.
St. Elizabeth, Dale. Right, Dale. I thought it was Dale's, and I asked him when I put it in that book, in my book, but I wasn't sure. That's what I thought. Yes, a question about the floor checks before we move on. I think, yeah, like a timeline from 0 to all the way up. Question?
I was curious about the other. I mean, obviously from psychodrama and what we would want that. In the floor checks, though, especially in a bigger group, my instinct would be to go straight there if we couldn't see people's shares. I'd be concerned a lot of intense feelings might be put into the other. I'm wondering if you can comment on when you're in a large group, if you focus on the other or at least hear a word from them, or how you make sure that there's no suicidality, for instance, in the other.
No what?
Suicidality or
other?
Or like urges.
That I haven't come up with that problem ever around the other, and people don't generally do, in my experience. I think we need to go like much higher. Is that okay? We can do this. But if you figure it out, you're welcome to tell me, but I've never run into that, and I've probably done many thousands of floor checks. If somebody had suicidality, they don't generally announce it in a floor check, I don't think, you know. But I've never heard it announced in a floor check. Maybe you're talking about a very small treatment group in a very, you know. But other has to be there, right? Is that what you're saying? Is other safe?
If your intention is you focus on other if you can't hear everyone share, where you focus your shares.
I don't focus them. I just tell people in psychodrama we always have other. I didn't say it here, so sorry about that, but I always say it because we never know in psychodrama. I love other in psychodrama. I couldn't believe it when I got introduced to that concept. It was like X in algebra, you know, the room for the infinite, room for the unknown. I don't have a good answer for that, but I don't tell people to go anywhere or avoid anything. Yeah.
You can always check.
You can always what?
You can always check, ask them what
Yeah.
they mean by other.
Oh, I always
Good
do that. Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking, so,
You always say, I'm standing on other because.
right, I'm saying if you have a large group, do you focus your share, like your verbal sharing based on any kind of clusters, for instance?
It's all warm up. I don't focus anything.
Okay.
It's all in the group. I always say, whenever you're warmed up, if you don't want to share, don't share. If you're warmed up to share, share. And if somebody's alone, the way somebody was on Lonely, I would always explore that. If there's a sociometric isolate, I always walk over to them. But Dave did that, so, you know. Sure. Anybody else, or should we move into the attachment timeline? Okay, let's, you know, I feel like I want to say one other thing about that. Scary stuff happens when we work with clients. We're using a method that warms people up, you know? That's why I've broken it down. Because psychodrama is evocative. In fact, this is evocative. I did this at a treatment center in another state, in another country, actually, last week. And for the client, it was remarkably freeing. It was just remarkably freeing. But for the group members, it was triggering, right? So these methods we use they're not talk. They're intense. So the reason I'm doing an attachment timeline, I've done a trauma timeline for many years. I mean, like couple decades. And that really, I started that because when I would work with trauma, which if you recall, when Bessel van der Kolk's work came out in the mid-'80s, I would talk to people about trauma and they would go foggy. They couldn't remember. It was early in the trauma understanding. And they couldn't recall events, and they were having, or I'd give a talk in a group, and I would look around, and half the group was just nodding off. And I can be pretty boring, but not that boring. It's, you know, the people got overwhelmed with the idea of trauma. It's very different with audiences today when you talk about trauma. People are used to it, they don't tune out, and it's metabolized in our field in a big way. So the trauma timeline, I now like using an attachment timeline because since then the attachment literature has become so good. And it really is about attachment, right? I mean, any rupture in a relationship with the self or the other is what we're treating when we treat relational trauma anyway. So I'm just using the attachment timeline now. The way I do this, and I don't think we have time to go through the first, and you don't need to, but I do it on paper first and ask groups to put a line on the bottom of the paper and divide it into 5-year intervals. And then just enter in wherever they felt there was a rupture in attachment with themselves or attachment with a significant relationship. And again, here I use Porges's research, neuroception, all of the and Dan Siegel, Interpersonal Neurobiology, all of the literature on the long-term effects of a rupture with an attachment figure, which then becomes a status nascendi for so many subsequent ruptures. When they do it on paper, then I just share it the way you would share a social atom, just walk us through, share it bit by bit. And for many groups, that's sufficient, right? That's a lot to do, and you don't have to do more. If you want to do more and your group isn't going to handle a walking the timeline process, you can always just say, is there any point you got in touch with that you want to talk to yourself, and do an empty chair. An empty chair is a little more controlled than a role player. So it's just your clinical judgment. What I like to do after sharing the trauma timeline, the attachment timeline or trauma timeline, is invite the group to come up. And this is a really fun move because, again, I'm reducing the role of the therapist and enhancing the member-to-member connection. I don't know about the rest of you, but I just don't have it to give treatment groups all the time. I'm not in the place they're in. I'm much more recovered. But when I was in treatment for relational trauma, essentially, I'm a child of an alcoholic, I adored every word anybody had to say or share with me that was filled with understanding and empathy, because we opened these subjects up for the first time. So that's what this does. You can just open the floor and say, walk over to an age where you feel you've got work to do, where you feel, you breathed in and you haven't exhaled for years, where you feel there's something you want to say that you can't get out, and stand by that. And do you want to, I don't think we need to do that in this group because you know how that's going to work, but would you? We have two choices. We can do that and then do a very shorter walk of an individual, and you can see how I would handle that. Or you can imagine that part, and then we can invite somebody to walk it. I think that's, well, what would you like to do? Tell me what to do. What? So just imagine this part. Thank you. I think so too. It's easy, but you find the same thing happening. The bubble starts to happen. The babies are talking to the babies, the 3-year-olds to the 3-year-olds, the teenagers to the teenagers. And each group starts to function differently, and it's great to watch. And that's all you have to do for that group process, because they are holding and healing each other, right? And you can lean into co-regulation and limbic regulation on these things. You can trust the group to hold each other. And I think that would, speaking to the young therapists, you may have crossed this bridge already, but for me it was momentous in my young years to realize I could not possibly have the answers. I couldn't possibly be the only healing agent in the room. So the more, and that's Morena, right? It's all in the group. It's all in the group. Mobilize the group. And it's the way Montessori operated. And I got a lot of my ideas from being a Montessori teacher before psychodrama. Is she does a prepared environment. So I've created prepared environments with this, with floor checks. And then Montessori gives prompts. And the children, the environment, the teacher functions as a catalyst between the children and the environment. And that's what I have done with the therapist in sociometrics. I've turned the therapist into a catalyst between the prepared environment and the client. And I think it works. Is there anybody who wants to walk an attachment timeline? Who's warmed up to do something like that? So we have 2 minutes. If there are any questions or comments? Yes. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Go the other way too, right? Go past too. For example, if you were, if your parents were Holocaust survivors, or if they brought in a lot of history, you might walk their time. Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. Anything else? And absolutely, you can do ancestral trauma to be developed. I would, I know I do it, but I haven't done enough of it. So if you have good ways of doing it. Another comment or addition like that, if you like, or question. Yes. Oh, I would normally allow it. It's that you may not have heard because you were walking up, but I had just said, look around the room and choose someone too. And therefore, I didn't want to put him in the position. He was warming up and starting to look around, right, Hayden? Yeah, he was looking around and then into his next phase. And I was concerned that you might be doubling for something he'd already experienced he was going through. And that was that correct? You might have been, yeah. Yes, that was the only reason. Otherwise, I'd have welcomed it. Yeah. Everybody doubles here so well. You don't get to see all the mistakes in doubling that people make when they either outpower the protagonist and get way out of their, orbit, or they double so late that the protagonist has to hop in their own head and say, did I feel that? Well, I felt that. Because they're time traveling. The protagonist's experience is one of time traveling. And they're like children, they move from here to here, whoop, and the double that's back here makes them come back there. Not that you were doing any of that, but he was in a new thing, so I just wanted to time travel with him. That's all. Yeah, I'm glad you asked. And I think that's pretty much, I want to respect your schedules. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is a big honor to be with you. I just love being with you. This is so cool.
And again, Dr. Tian Dayton and her new book, Sociometrics, you can find online. And,
How cool.
and the award ceremony will be in this room at 1:15, and we will provide lunch.
I want to talk with you. I want us to meet. I'm going to Italy next month. So when we get back, I want us to sit down somewhere in between where your summer home is and where I is. I have a lot of ideas.
Okay.
And I just want to reconnect with you.
Okay. Or come over for lunch. I'll make you lunch.
Do you have cats? No. Okay. Nothing you'll be allergic to. I've missed you. I've loved, I love your